I remember the day when I lost my Rayman virginity. You never forget your first time. For some, it's a night they never want to forget. It's a night of triumph, a night they celebrate, a night they are proud of. They treat it as a trophy to be held aloft for the world to see. My first time wasn't so glamorous. It's not something I like thinking about, it's something I'd rather forget. But I suppose I should just get it off my chest. My first time was rough. It started off pretty well, I was enjoying it, but somewhere towards the halfway point, it evolved into something truly horrible. I was sweating, I was angry, my hands were struggling to keep up with what was going on, the fire alarm was going off, the dog was barking like mad, which was confusing because I don't have a dog, my collection of antique dolls was knocked onto the floor, I couldn't find my application for that cockroach milking job. Have you heard about this? There's a species of cockroach that creates milk in the form of tiny crystals, and once humans consume it, it melts and becomes delicious milky goodness. Can you believe that? Is it even real, or was it a dream? What is real? Reality is what your brain chooses to believe, but how could you believe this? What kind of world do we live in? It was a mess, a really difficult 8 hours. Rayman really put me through the ringer. For that reason, I was hesitant to go at it a second time. My first Rayman experience was a disaster. There was quite a lot to enjoy about it, but it was violently overshadowed by the tail end, where everything just went to shit. The idea of soldiering on for Rayman 2... was it a good one? Did I really want to relive that sort of experience? I mean, think about all the other things I could do with that time. I could listen to a podcast, I could go and get some keys cut, I could adopt a family of imps, and we could go steal from the local library. There are so many things I could do instead. But I can't be afraid. That's no way to live. People can change. Why would Rayman be any different? If I don't try it, I'll live the rest of my life not knowing. Will I really be content with that? No, goddammit, no! I decided I needed to play Rayman 2 for the closure if nothing else. Would it be a repeat of the first game, or something entirely different? Let me tell you how it went. So let me start with a list of things I knew about Rayman 2 before I played it. The first thing I found out about Rayman 2 was that there's a ridiculous amount of different versions of this game. There are so many! I'm going to say there's at least 2. And each of them have their own quirks and differences. Before the game had even started, I had to make a choice. I was overwhelmed, so I took a step back and took some time myself to think it over. In that time, I played and reviewed Crash Team Racing, Spyro Season of Ice, Croc 2, Shantae, Crash Bash, Spyro 2 Season of Flame, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, Banjo-Tooie, Luigi's Mansion, Medieval, Crash Bandicoot XS, and Spyro Attack of the Rhinox. I may have forgotten to think it over. In the end, I decided on the PS2 version. I just had a gut feeling that it would provide the best possible Rayman 2 experience. I mean, the PS2 had the EyeToy, which introduced me to the colour cyan. You can't compete with that. What I was expecting here was the first Rayman game, but again. That's why I was so hesitant, because the first Rayman game, while it was fun, was also a pain in the arse. I had to use Anusol just to get through it. But it was such a relief to have those fears immediately shattered. Rayman 2 is 3D, which is cool. Now I can get fisted from an additional third dimension. In all seriousness though, I was relieved because 3D platformers tend to be a lot easier than 2D platformers. I don't really know why that is, it just is. And I was happy about it. This was brand new territory. A fresh start for my Rayman journey, if you will. Based on my experience of playing through the opening level in the hub world, I was into it. I liked what I was seeing. Rayman controlled pretty well, and actually reminded me of Spyro, only with less horizontal air movement. It was cool. Everything looked pretty good, perhaps not on par with the more popular and successful PS2 games. It's not an A-lister, but still pretty good, I reckon. I'm going to call it lush. And just like the first game, I was really enjoying the music too. It was a basher. That's what kids say when they like music, right? Basher? Sounds about right. But it wasn't long before my enthusiasm began to fade and I started to worry. I was noticing that every so often, there were pretty noticeable frame drops and slowdowns. I didn't know if it was because the system was struggling, or if the game just runs like that, or if the pressure of having to entertain me was too much for it to bear, but it happened every so often and I wasn't happy about it. That sort of thing can make and break games. I did some extensive research and found out that this is a known issue with the PS2 version. It just slows down sometimes. I didn't look into the technical side of it, I just needed to know if these frame drops were my fault. And it turns out they aren't. But I don't want to have to put up with them. I don't want to continue if they're going to keep occurring. I think it's time we reassess how I'm tackling this. Let's rewind back to the very beginning. It's a boy! Oh wow! I'm gonna call him Torren. I can't wait to sell his baby teeth! Hold on, I think we went too far. Let's get back on track. So the PS2 version was a bust. My gut told me to play that version, and it was a bad idea. Although I should have expected that, my gut usually steers me the wrong way. It told me it would be a good idea to imply that my mum only birthed me so she could sell my baby teeth. That was also a bad idea. So let's try a different one. I'm thinking the PS1 version. I mean, it's the PS2 version's older sibling, so surely it has more experience and knows what it's doing, right? It's older sibling supremacy 101. Experiencing the opening again is allowing me to appreciate the story of this game. I don't think I was harsh enough on the story in the first Rayman. It was fucking dreadful. It was just nothing. It was literally a guy in a hat stealing an orb, and Rayman trying to get it back. Who cares? What even is that? To call that a narrative is an insult to narratives, and I want the writer of the first Rayman game to take that personally. You are shit at your job, whoever you are. However, if you also wrote this game, I take it back. At least there's stuff going on here. The story of Rayman 2 is all about this army of robot pirates, spearheaded by Admiral Razorbeard, who has enslaved thousands of creatures and intends to conquer Rayman's world, whatever it's called. It's up to Rayman to take the fight to the robot pirates by collecting 4 masks to awaken some guy called Polycus, free all of the slaves, and save the world. Granted, it's not award-winning material, but at least there's some development and jeopardy in this story. There are stakes, important characters, things that happen, it develops as the game progresses, which is more than I can say about the first game's pathetic excuse for a plot. I've got to give praise where it's due. Rayman 2's story is actually pretty decent, as far as platformers go. Starting over again meant that I had to play the PS1 version of the opening level again, and aside from some very minor differences, controlling Rayman and the gameplay of the level was pretty much the same. It's a solid opening level, it tells you everything you need to know. What I was interested by was that in this version, there is no hub world, but instead a world map. It makes me wonder how many differences there actually are between versions. If I may be honest here for a moment, I don't like being naked for extended periods of time, because I'm worried that I'll be abducted via teleportation, and if I don't have clothes with me, I won't be able to make a good first impression on my kidnappers. I also think I prefer world maps to hub worlds. It just streamlines the whole experience and makes linear games like this one a lot more focused and easy to play. That's just me though. There are some that prefer hub worlds, and that's absolutely fine. That's the great thing about humanity. We may all have our differences, but after we fight devastating bloody wars over them, we learn to pretend to get along. Isn't that just beautiful? Okay, I think it's time to rip the band-aid off now and actually talk about the gameplay. The gameplay I was actually dreading the most, because the first Rayman game kicked my ass in a way that was less like a fun obstacle course and more like a Victorian torture chamber. But I'm so glad to report that Rayman 2's gameplay is great. It's pretty fun, it's very simple. Most of what you do playing as Rayman is running and jumping through 3D environments, using helicopter hair to glide over distances, and also shoot projectiles to defeat enemies, free caged creatures, and activate switches and buttons. It sounds simple, and it is. And it's enjoyable. It's a very different take on Rayman compared to the first game, but I think it's for the best. 3D platformers were the rage at the time, and I think I would have ripped my hair out and eaten it if I had to put up with any more 2D Rayman bullshit. Rayman 2 is a very fair game, and that put all my fears to rest. The platforming is fair and never too demanding. It doesn't expect the impossible, and I appreciate that. It was one of the things I hated about the first game. It would spawn in enemies and hazards randomly and expect you to react to them in a split second. It was a totally unreasonable thing to ask of any first-time player. Rayman 2 takes it easy on you, and I found that throughout the whole game, I never got frustrated or annoyed. It was pretty cruisy, and I loved it. Just jumping through, gliding around, and enjoying the vibe. Not every game needs to be a gauntlet of pain leading to a single moment of triumph. Let's just have fun, you know? That's not to say that Rayman 2 doesn't keep you on your toes. The levels in Rayman 2 have a lot more going on than what I described just then. There are additional abilities Rayman learns throughout the game, such as arm swinging and charge shots, and others he can perform intrinsically, like climbing and swimming. These elevate the basic gameplay to allow for some more interesting challenges. There's also something to be said for how dynamic and varied the levels are. Some are purely basic platforming, others involve the use of a unique vehicle, some grant Rayman a temporary new ability like the power of flight. Vehicles and gimmicks can be a bit iffy in these games, and they aren't the best here, but they certainly aren't bad. They're quirky and refreshing, but also don't stick around for too long, and that's something to celebrate. Each level offers something different. I just wish that were the case for the environments. As much as I love greenery, pirate ships and temples, I did occasionally find myself longing for something else. It doesn't take away from the gameplay though, it's all very enjoyable. One of the other things I wasn't a fan of in the first Rayman was the life system. I thought it was flawed, it was very easy to lose lives and very difficult to gain them. On top of that, the limited number of continues you were granted was stupid. It was brutal, it didn't give you any room to breathe, and you need to breathe to stay alive. In Rayman 2, however, much like everything else, the life system was completely revamped. In fact, lives were done away with entirely. If you die, you only lose a bit of health, and once you lose all your health, you just have to start again from the beginning of the level section you're currently in. There's pretty much no punishment for dying at all, really. Maybe that's why I found the game so cruisy. The memories of being chewed up and spat out by the original game time and time again made this game seem like a cakewalk. And this system makes the game easier as you keep playing, as with every cage you break open, Rayman's health total increases. Compared to the first game, Rayman 2 is extremely generous with its life system, and I'm so glad. If I had to deal with the first Rayman's bullshit again, unspeakable things would have happened. Speaking of bullshit, one of the other things about the original game that caused me to lose the will to live was the fact that to even play the final level, you needed to essentially 100% complete the game. And because of how the secrets worked in that game, doing that would have been an absolute nightmare. Because of that, I never actually got to finish the game, and I was furious. All that time and effort for absolutely no payoff whatsoever. I was livid. Rayman 2 fixes this whole ordeal in two ways. It has two solutions for it. First of all, 100% completion is not required to beat the game. You just need a certain amount of lums to unlock the next set of levels. You don't need all of them, you just need enough of them. I think the minimum was 600 to reach the end of the game. Now this had the potential to be an absolute disaster if the collectibles were handled in the same way as the first game. That is to say, hidden behind ridiculous conditions that not even Einstein would be able to crack. It was outrageous. In Rayman 2, all of the collectibles, that is, lums and cages, are all pretty obvious and hard to miss. Again, no bullshit. Rayman 2 seems to have learned quite a few lessons, the main one being, players don't like it when your game is a prick. The 100% completion in Rayman 2 was actually so approachable that I ended up doing it. I found all the lums and cages without too much trouble. Like I keep saying, this game is very cruisy, and I just love that. The juxtaposition of the first game's brutality and this game's chill nature is so funny to me. Going for 100% also meant that when I finished the game, I was rewarded with the opportunity to play a level from what I believe is the Rayman 2 prototype. This was a 2D level that looked very similar to the first game, so it instantly gave me war flashbacks, and I never actually finished it, but it was cool to see what Rayman 2 would have looked like originally. I love stuff like that. It also lets me know that I really dodged a bullet with this game. There isn't much I really dislike about this game either. It's got its shit together. The bosses, I will say, are pretty lackluster and are easily the most forgettable part of the game, and I think the combat generally is my least favourite part. It's not a simple jump on the enemy's head sort of combat, it's basically a full-on gun battle, and I'm not really too keen on it. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't want to kill these robot pirates, I want to have sex with them. I just didn't enjoy the combat all that much. I especially didn't enjoy fighting that robot pirate ninja, which appeared 128 times, each taking at least a minute or two to beat. But I've got to say, if that's the worst part of the game, then that means you've got a pretty good game on your hands. Having now beaten Rayman 2, I'm confused. Rayman 2 is wildly different to its predecessor, but it's better in so many ways. Now, don't get it twisted, my sweet young children. I don't think the first Rayman game is bad. I actually think it's pretty good. It just has some very major flaws that have corrupted the way I remember the game. Rayman 2, even though it's a completely different game, managed to fix a lot of the issues I had with the first game. There is no bullshit, no strict 100% completion requirements, no harsh life system. It just removed so many of the flaws so easily and effortlessly. I think the story and presentation is much better here, since you get a better impression of the world and characters, especially Rayman himself, and I think the music for both games is pretty on par between them. The gameplay, while simple, is very enjoyable and varied enough to keep you playing. The vehicles and gimmicks were never too intrusive, and were usually pretty fun. And while it is an incredibly easy game, I don't think it takes away from the experience. It's refreshing after the cruel nature of the first game, and I don't think you can blame me for that. Rayman 2 is a great game and definitely better than the first. Well, the PS1 version at least. I'm not sure what the other versions have to offer since they're apparently all different, but in this case I can say with confidence that Rayman 2 is a brilliant game. But enough about that, I've got to go get my baby teeth back. They were wrongfully taken from me. They're mine, god damn it!